This week, preparing for the worst in VR, a bunch of new apples, and the bouncy, strokey, stretchy, bendy, slimy world of soft robotics. It is hard to believe that the world is safer than it used to be. It is, but the nature of the terror attacks in the West in the last few years, the increasing use of vehicles, knives and guns to carry out prolonged attacks, have forced the authorities to think differently about how to deal with a terrorist incident. And of course, they're not confined to the West. In some parts of the world, these atrocities are more common and often have more casualties.
It's difficult to predict when and where a terrorist attack will occur. But while the authorities can't predict, they can prepare for the worst.
This is a large-scale counter-terrorism training exercise. It was a combined effort, including London's Metropolitan Police, fire and ambulance and river services.
However, training on this scale is expensive and requires large numbers of personnel and huge amounts of planning, so it can't happen that often. But there are new ways to train more people individually. Mark Cheslak has been taking part in a new type of terror training.
Since 2015, from all across Europe, a group of 14 partners, including law enforcement, emergency services, transport companies and universities, have been working together on a 3-year project to create training simulations for real-world terrorist attacks using virtual reality. The project is called AugMed and has been funded by an EU research and innovation programme. Part of it has been designed here at Sheffield Hallam University. Rather than build new technologies from the ground up, the hardware and the software, which is at the core of this training system, is tech which is more commonly found used in video games. And that technology is proving to be a flexible training tool.
You can act out a lot more scenarios that would be too dangerous to do in any real-life setting. It's a lot cheaper, it's more cost-effective, it's easier to set up, and it offers a whole range of scenarios that you couldn't do in real life because they'd just be too dangerous or too complicated.
It's a big project, virtual simulations which can be used to train a wide variety of different people, from paramedics to the police, and even those employed by the transport networks.
So for this scenario, we're going to put a new bag down here. Here we are. And so the trainees are going to be looking for this bag.
A suspect bag has been placed in an accurate virtual model of a real location, a subway station called Montana in the Spanish city of Barcelona. My task as a trainee is to find it.
And get in the simulation.
Okay, so I'm on the platform now. I can see people. I can't walk into them. Now I can see a package over there. I can interact with the bag. Press this button here. The bag opens. There's what I'm assuming is some kind of explosive with wires plugged into it.
So in this situation, I'm going to tell you to start evacuating all civilians in the immediate area.
I'm going to tell them
Start
to evacuate.
Start evacuating!
But all doesn't go to plan.
Now your people are evacuating towards the bomb, which you don't want. So you might want to go onto the platforms to start evacuating people in the correct direction.
So all of the passengers are all being driven by an AI, yeah?
Yep.
But the people behave in a pretty realistic fashion.
Yes.
Start evacuating!
That's all based on scientific data of what people do in real situations. So you've successfully started evacuating everybody who's been on all the platforms.
Next, a different scenario. We can't show too much of this as the images are just too graphic. In the aftermath of an explosion, a paramedic trainee must triage the injured passengers, applying different coloured stickers to a passenger. The different colours indicate the urgency of the requirement for treatment. It's an unsettling and distressing experience. It's meant to be, though. The overwhelming sound and distressing images are designed to replicate real-world situations. But this system isn't just the work of counter-terrorism researchers and software engineers. To find out more, I travelled to the real location featured in the simulation. In recent years, terrorist atrocities have been carried out all over Europe, highlighting the international nature of the response to this terrorism. Here in Barcelona, the emergency services themselves have played a key role in the design of the AugMed virtual reality simulation. Jose Geraldo is a doctor and emergency first responder here in Barcelona. He's been helping to fine-tune the system to improve its utility to emergency services and paramedics. So this is the station that I saw in the VR model then?
Yeah.
What's the big thing that you get from the virtual reality, from the fact that it's so immersive that you're thrown into a virtual world?
When I get to real situation, I'm used to it. I'm trained for it. So it doesn't surprise me so much as it could.
It's quite unusual being in the real Montigny station, having spent a little bit of time in the virtual version of it. And what's been quite interesting walking around here is noticing that I now know the layout, the geography of the station. I know where all of the exits are, I know where the escalators are and which direction of travel they go in. So even I was able to learn something very, very quickly in that virtual reality version of this subway station. But VR has its limitations. Robert Guest is from Birmingham University and is part of the AugMed development team.
You can't really get a physical hands-on an object in virtual reality, but what we can train is things like decision-based training. We can look at emotional management and general communication skills between different team members.
We see terrorists constantly changing their tactics. How do you guys respond to those change of tactics?
The benefit of this project as a whole is that we can rapidly change what scenarios are actually being trained. So if new tactics are being used out in the public and reality, we can bring those into a virtual world and allow people to train them for those situations very rapidly.
The next stage of this system's development is a haptic vest, which provides force feedback to trainees, simulating physical sensations. It's also fitted with heating elements, which make the trainee hotter. If you're in a kind of stressful environment like this one, there's a good chance that you will start to get hot and sweaty. And so as soon as you get uncomfortable, then that makes it a lot more difficult to do your job. It creates an environment for them which is as close as it can be to the real one. This whole system isn't designed to replace real-world training, but to augment it, to allow people to train remotely if need be, constantly reinforcing their skills. Skills which recently have been sadly tested all too often.
That was Mark. Now, while the professional first responders are always going to be better trained, it's us, the public, who are almost always going to be first on the scene of an attack.
Current advice from the British police is to run from an incident rather than surrender or try to negotiate with attackers. This online video also explains how and where to hide if you can't escape.
Now, if you dial 999, but it's not safe to talk out loud, the operator will give you the option to dial 55 to show that you haven't called by accident and you really do need help. 55 looks like SS, which stands for Silent Solution. There is also an app called Citizen Aid, which uses advice from combat situations to help users administer first aid and make more informed decisions in different emergency situations.
Hello and welcome to the Week in Tech. It was the week that Uber refunded customers for journeys taken near last Saturday night's London terror attacks, after pricing had automatically surged due to demand, a function they disabled later that evening. The comment section on Britney Spears' Instagram account has been used by Russian-speaking hackers to test malware. And Snapchat specs have gone on sale in the UK, if you think this is a sensible way to go out. Google's Street View cars have been tracking air pollution. After a year of the vehicles driving around the streets of Oakland, California, data localised to individual roads has become available, with initial recordings of black carbon, nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide being revealed. Anyone with kids can tell you what it's like trying to get Play-Doh out the carpet. But sadly, I don't have a new gadget to tell you about for that. It's actually the Play Clay that's gone high-tech. Dough Universe can conduct electricity and aims to help kids learn about circuits, sound, light and movement through play. And finally, researchers at MIT have developed sensors for the grippers of robotic arms that aim to help bots grab things with the right amount of pressure. The gel sight sensors aim to make negotiating smaller objects possible, as well as making general household tasks easier to approach, which would be handy if one day robots are to become ordinary household companions.
This annual running of the Nerds can only mean one thing. We're in San Jose for Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, otherwise known as WWDC. It's an event the company doesn't typically use to make big product announcements, but this year, perhaps feeling the heat a little, they broke with tradition and revealed a bunch of new stuff.
It's been 15 years since we held the developer conference in San Jose, and an awful lot has changed.
The HomePod is a direct competitor to assistants made by Amazon and Google. It will cost $349 and be available later this year in the US, UK and Australia. Other countries will get it in 2018. It will be controlled by Siri, but Apple isn't really calling it a home assistant. They say it's a music device first and foremost. We weren't allowed to film it in action, but I was given a private listen and, well, it does sound fantastic.
But one of the potential downsides is that you need an Apple Music subscription in order to get the full integration. So if you prefer to use Spotify or Pandora, maybe not quite a device for you.
In other news, Apple says it can become the biggest augmented reality platform overnight. This demo is from the new production house run by Peter Jackson, the man famed for creating the Lord of the Rings movies. And the iPad has been given a new lease of life. They announced a new 10.5-inch iPad Pro, and the next version of Apple's operating system will see the tablet get a bunch of extra features.
Many people might see this as a kind of middle ground between getting a very expensive computer but still being able to get their work done.
Several thousand developers turn up to WWDC every year. Many more would come if they could get tickets. Among the masses, I found the youngest attendee, 10-year-old Yuma, who'd come all the way from Melbourne, Australia.
I just enjoy the fact that I can turn my ideas into reality by programming and making apps. So this is my most recent app, which I published 6 days ago. So you can click anywhere to place a block, and your goal here is to actually get the highest tower of blocks.
So you're obviously much younger than
Yes.
everybody here.
Yes.
So what do you want to do when you grow up? Are you going to carry on making apps?
I want to be a turtle.
You want to be a turtle?
I'm joking.
I mean, why not?
How can I just turn myself into a turtle and grow a shell and become green? I'm joking. I would like to create apps that can revolutionize the world, and I also want to teach the world coding and get them into coding so they can actually improve all the technology we have and make technology a whole lot better.
A young man destined for great things, I'm sure.
Can you see me?
Think robots, and maybe you'll picture something like this. Or this. But what about robotic muscle and smart materials that could act as human skin or clothes that rehabilitate you as you wear them? Well, that is part of what's called soft robotics, and this team at Bristol Robotics Lab are bioengineering technologies to do all of that and more. I went to take a peek at their labs.
This is a bucket of alien saliva, right?
Yeah.
Yep, this is the same stuff that drips out of the alien mouth. So Ridley Scott just used a whole bunch of that.
Though in this case, it's to simulate blood. This soft robot mimics how some bacteria move through our bodies. In the future, it's thought that nanorobots will take a similar trip through our veins, looking for infection and illness.
Oh, that's awesome.
Some of the projects they're working on here involve making assistive technology for elderly and disabled people, like this pneumatic artificial muscle. It can be made into any shape and built into clothing. As you apply air, it changes its shape, so it could, for instance, help people with limited grip strength. Its force is only dependent on how much air pressure you apply. And here's some material which can sense when that pressure should be applied. This diametric elastomer can detect when it's being stretched, so it can sense when you try to move and add extra power to maybe help you up the stairs. And it can not only detect movement, it can also change its shape when you apply a high enough voltage.
You could use it for changeable clothing that can change its colour. You can use it as a sort of second skin to help with deep vein thrombosis to assist with pumping blood.
It could even be layered up to create stronger artificial muscles.
It doesn't seem like it's doing a lot, but actually it's very thin. It weighs almost nothing, and it's the active part of which only weighs, let's say, 4 grams, and they can lift 2 kilos.
In one respect, none of this is complicated.
Yeah.
None of this is extremely high tech, using like billions of transistors. It's simple voltage and a piece of material.
I think that's one of the big advantages of soft robotics is simplicity, redundancy. In a complicated robotic system, you have a lot of elements that can go wrong. And with these sort of things, it's very simple and it's very adaptable. The intelligence is in the design and the media that you use, rather than in the complexity.
The robotics lab in Bristol is a 50,000 square foot hive of innovation filled with hundreds of different types of robots. But what nearly all have in common is they need power to run. Over in the bioenergy lab, scientists are working on one freely available resource the world will never run out of: urine. Each one of these cylinders is a microbial fuel cell device. It turns wastewater into electricity using microbes.
So the microbes, they eat the waste.
They eat the waste. That's their favorite item on the menu.
Right. Okay.
Essentially.
I've been to that restaurant. Yeah.
In this unit, 2 litres of urine is fed into the fuel cell pack. The microbes eat what they need, creating electrons as a byproduct. And because they're attached to an electrode surface, it's all collected to produce about 30 to 40 milliwatts of power. Now that's enough to slowly charge a smartphone, power smart displays, or power internal lights for their special portable toilets.
This is only one unit of many. When we do it out of the lab, when we install these units out of the lab, we have many more of them connected together as a stack.
If you're going to Glastonbury this year, you might see these screens near the urinals. And if you choose to use the urinals, then you'll be part of an experiment which is literally putting the pee into power.
These are e-ink displays which don't require a lot of power, but a lucky few may be able to charge their phones for a bit, but only after donating. Most of the pee used here comes from staff donors at the lab. It's only good for the microbes for an hour or so, so a constant supply is needed. Although, I think I'll hang on.
Around the world, scientists are looking at different ways of improving our quality of life. Here, it's alternate sources of power at soft robotics, it's smart materials, and possibly in the future, bionic limbs. But in Italy's Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, they're looking at sensation. Animatronic went there to look at attempts to simulate touch.
I am at the Biorobotics Lab, where researchers are trying to merge human physiology with machine engineering. The team are working on a bionic fingertip that is capable of detecting texture.
The human sense of touch is an incredibly complex one. I don't even need to look at these 3 pieces of plastic to sense the differences in the coarseness of the ridges. This, of course, presents a huge problem to people designing artificial limbs. How do you transfer that same sensitivity into a prosthetic hand?
To create a machine capable of sensing and transmitting tactile data, first we need to understand how bodies decode sensory stimuli. Fingertips have the highest concentration of sensation almost anywhere in the human body, thanks to 20,000 nerve fibers on each finger and these tiny receptors. They react to sensory information as we move our fingers across different surfaces. Each receptor has a different role. Some respond to pain, some to temperature, others react to pressure or vibration.
And this is the characteristic that allows our skin to interact with the environment and to allow an object, when manipulated, not to break.
The bionic fingertip registers the textures it touches as electrical spikes. On screen, it may look simple, but that is exactly the language that our nervous system speaks. As we touch objects, it sends nerve impulses to the brain. And the tiny, subtle variations in how the skin deforms as we touch changes those impulses and how we perceive texture.
This kind of bioinspiration capitalizes on the natural principle and so can be more effective as humans and animals in general can act and interact with the environment.
Professor Odo and his team have already had some success. Dennis Sorensen was one of the first amputees to try out the bionic fingertip. The output from the finger was directly connected to the healthy nerves in his upper arm.
I could tell the difference between where it was very rough and smooth, and yeah, that was amazing.
And since this first clinical trial a couple of years ago, the team have been trying to increase the number of textures the patients can feel.
The experiments that we are showing now are demonstrating the capability to encode, as an example, silk from cotton, from latex, from wool, from different kind of materials, and this way we could restore a more natural sense of touch to the amputee that is wearing the prosthesis.
What is learned here can be transferred to other applications. For example, a surgical robot could use this technology to identify tumors which would feel different in texture to healthy tissue.
Another kind of application is for rescue, so to allow robots to be present in the environment not only through vision or through audition, but to have more senses available when exploring an environment. Think, for example, the nuclear disasters, or in case of underwater application, the robot can go and touch and perceive the environment and act based also on the sensory feedback that you can have remotely controlling the robot.
Once this technology is mastered, it can be integrated into simple things like gloves. So, for instance, I could be anywhere in the world. My husband, back in New York, can give me the sensation of petting our cat, and that would be transferred through these actuators to me, anywhere in the world. I want one right now.
Well, I can't give you that at the moment, Anna, but in the meantime, how about a hug from this chap? And that's it from the Bristol Robotics Lab. Next week, we are going to be in Los Angeles for the annual E3 Video Games Extravaganza. It's going to be brilliant. We will tweet everything we see at BBC Click. You can also follow us on Facebook for loads of extra content throughout the week too. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in LA.